Welcome, everyone. I'm Mariquita Solis, the live stream host of all-creatures.org. All-creatures.org was founded in 1998 and is a leading resource for faith-based animal rights veganism. Led by our executive director, Tams Nicholson, we provide free resources for people seeking to live compassionately towards all creatures. Our extensive library includes vegan sermons and commentaries, animal rights strategies, action alerts, events, and works by various vegan authors. We also sponsor websites for animal rights organizations. Our mission is to unite compassionate individuals worldwide who honor the dignity of all creatures. So today we are very honored to welcome Robert Grillo. Robert is an activist, author, and speaker calling for a transition to a plant-based food system. Since 2009, Grillo has been spearheading the work of grassroots activism group Free from Harm, organizing actions and events around the country where the highest level power holders are making the biggest deals and decisions about our food system, and which impacts billions of animals, consumers, and the planet. So I'm very excited about today's conversation. Let us know where you're joining from. And I see Samara is here, and she's a big fan of Free from Harm. Please let us know where you're joining from and get your comments and questions in the chat because we'll be answering those. Well, not me, but Robert will be. So welcome, Robert. I'm very excited to have you here. You're such a powerhouse, and you know how to organize and take charge when it comes to these big organizations that are wreaking such havoc on our world.
Hi, how are you? It's good to see you again.
Well, it's wonderful to have this conversation today, and thank you for joining us, Ellen. Everyone, make sure you're subscribed and you hit like. So, Robert, let me just start off with when did you decide to go vegan? How did that come about?
That was back in about 2009, that year, and I think it was pretty late in life. You know, I wish that I was younger, and I know we always regret about whether we could have done this earlier or could have had an awakening earlier in life, but for me, it was pretty late. It was in my 40s, and uh, I think it was really, I have to credit Food Inc., the movie Food Inc., because while it doesn't have a vegan message at the end, it has a message of there's a better way to farm animals. There's a more humane and sustainable way to raise and slaughter animals for food. I think I believed that message for about 2 weeks. And then I realized that it was impossible for that to be true, and that was a fantasy. Uh, but the film still had a big impact on me, and definitely was the catalyst, I think. I'm sure there were lots of things before then brewing, that in my subconscious and stuff, but then that film just kind of brought things to the forefront, and it got me looking for a lot more um, stuff to learn about the industry. And I've been learning, even to every day you learn something new. You just can't believe what this industry is like, how it operates, not just on how it raises, slaughters animals, but also how it maneuvers in places of power and how it controls our food system and maintains power. It's really a an amazing it's an amazing ongoing story.
Yeah, it's very complex, and there's a lot of hidden agendas. It is very disturbing. So, when you went vegan, what did your family think and your friends?
Well, uh, I'm trying to think back on that time, and I think that you know, like most people, I think I had a fair amount of resistance. And at the time I was living alone, so it wasn't too big of a deal. It wasn't like I had roommates or had family here. So, but at the same time, yeah, it was like pushback, your typical pushback, your typical resistance. But fortunately, my partner was on board shortly after I went vegan. So that made things a lot a lot simpler.
Right. Yes, it can be complicated when your partner is not.
Yeah.
For some, Um, sorry, someone's barking behind me. Um, don't pay
It's all
attention to
right.
that.
Well, we'll assume that they like what they're hearing, otherwise,
Right.
or not. One of the two.
Right. Well, so a lot of new vegans feel very depressed about what's going on. What would you say to that depressed vegan and who doesn't want to get up and doesn't know how to take action or anything about it?
Well, I guess I could speak for myself, and I think I've seen this with a lot of other people though too, is that, when you feel that you found a purpose and a way of taking action, that really is meaningful to you, and you feel that is meaningful to others, to animals, and to the movement, then I think it gives you a really strong reason to wake up in the morning and persevere and keep going. And um, I I feel like, for a lot of my life, I said I had the vegan transformation kind of late in life. And up to that point, it just felt like, going through the motions of, uh, what everyone else did, go to work, you make a living, it's all about yourself, your friends, your family, this very insular, kind of bubble world that we all live in. And then all of a sudden it was like, the floodgates open and you realize that, um, with the knowledge that you have and the awareness that you have, that you want to give back, and you want to be a source for good. And there's many ways, that people can do that. But I think the antidote to that angst and depression, is to find ways that give you purpose and, make you feel good about the action you're taking. And I realized that could mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And so that's what we need, more people that can do that, because uh, people do make a difference. And even one person being at the right place at the right time could certainly like have an amazing impact on something. So we just have to find that purpose in our lives, that vegan purpose or whatever you want to call it, because we are needed. The animals definitely need us, and the planet needs advocates, for us to survive and thrive as a as a society. So we I hate to see these stories of people that it's disheartening, to hear about people in the movement that we've lost because, for whatever reason, um, because they made such a valuable contribution and now they're gone. And I've already, like, I can think of someone like Karen Davis, for example, of United Poultry Concerns, who passed away a couple of years ago. And you know, um, yeah, it's uh, hard to see that.
Yeah, it is. And everyone does make a difference. So we have to know that. And we don't know how big a difference we're making either. We don't know when we shared something with someone that it didn't really connect. I mean, a lot of times it doesn't connect for a while. So we have to make sure that we just keep doing the best we can.
Right.
Um, so let me ask you this about now, a lot of people will say animals don't have souls and they're not worthy, right? They're not on the same level as humans. What would you say to those people? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it kind of makes me think. We had an avian vet years ago who passed away, another person who passed away. He wasn't vegan, but he really did wonderful work, to help birds and chickens. And we had chickens that we took to him and he cared for several years. and pigeons as well. He was very much willing to do pro bono work too. I mean, he didn't charge us for a lot of different things, and he was very loved in the community, and the nonprofit rescue. Everybody knew who he was, but he always said that he was told that animals don't have souls. That in Christianity, that's kind of what you're taught. But being a vet and working with birds for so long and other animals, he said that once. He's like, yeah, we're not supposed to, we're supposed to not care as much because they don't have souls. And I said, I wonder how religions know that, and even if they do claim that we don't have a soul like humans do, what does that really mean? How does that really mean in terms of how we treat other animals? And of course he was on board, but it just seems like, why is that even relevant? I guess if someone would to say that, I would ask, why is that even relevant in terms of how we appreciate and relate to those other animals? It's just a human. Having a soul is what is that? A human construct, a religious construct? Does it mean that we can think and feel deeply? Because if that's the definition of it, then animals definitely have that capacity.
Yes, and most pet lovers, cats and dog lovers, would say that animals do have souls, but unfortunately, it doesn't always extend to caring for all animals, and that's where it's very complicated, I think, because I mean, if we are looking at major religions, they are teaching kindness and caring and stewardship, but then it just goes out the window.
Yeah, it seems like a distraction, like like an excuse.
Right. Well, I mean, we always have the thing saying that we have to eat meat, and that's the way it's been, and we're just trapped in this kind of thinking. And so, I want to know more about free from harm and your conversations with the big businesses. Tell us about free from harm and how that started.
Well, we started out in 2009, which was the same year I went vegan myself, and I just was looking for ways that I could, what could I do in terms of the skills I had? How could I contribute to the cause? And my thought was, since I had some experience building websites and doing some marketing, that I could apply those skills to building a website and an online presence through the website and the social media channels. So that's how the Free from Harm website was born. And we just started, we started out with a bang, and we had a lot of new content, and contributing authors, leading authors in our movement, and was going really well for years like that. We looked at our core work as doing education and outreach, which I think is, like, by default what we think activism is, right? But then as the years passed and as I started learning more, I realized that there's really a lot more to activism than just education and outreach. There are certainly baseline important activities, but there's much more that needs to be done to create a movement that changes something major, like a food system, for example, or an energy sector like the climate movement, an environmental movement is trying to do. Whenever you're dealing with a major system that's rigged, like the energy system sector or the food sector, it takes a lot of different strategies and popular support to put the pressure on that system to change. So yeah, and since then we realized that in addition to education and outreach, we had to do direct action and other ways to get in front of powerful people in the private and public sectors, public officials that are making those big decisions and deals, like you said earlier, to get in front of them, because, you know, we can't expect big change if we're not in the room. Like when these big decisions and deals are being made, if we're not in the room, if our voice is absent, literally absent, of course they're going to make decisions that don't benefit animals and the planet and ourselves. Of course they're going to make decisions that benefit their industries, and because there's so much money and influence between animal ag and Congress, and people in public high positions, of course they're going to make decisions that benefit them, because there's no resistance. There's no resistance from the outside. And that's what we aim to change. Exposing this corrupt system, protecting democracy by using our rights as activists. Because if you don't use them, we could lose them, right? And then getting in front of big decision makers and getting in those spaces of power, where these big decisions are being made, and saying, not so fast. This is not the right thing. We've got to shift that. We got to put pressure on that system and those big decision makers. And one of the first big steps that you see, if you're having an impact, is that you start seeing a shift in the language and the shift in the narrative. And I feel like we've definitely seen that among certain food industry people, as well as Congress people. All of a sudden saying things that subsidies aren't necessarily a good thing, that they could corrupt the system, that they could artificially make animal products too low in relation to how much cost it is to produce them. So we're seeing signs that even if they don't credit us or another group for having the impact, we're hearing them shift their language and how they look at animal ag subsidies and bird flu and animal agriculture in general. So it's not going to happen overnight, right? We all know that, but we are seeing positive signs that the narrative's shifting, the thinking on this is shifting, and that's the first sign of change.
Yeah, and it seems like it's an uphill battle. I mean, with so many subsidies handed out to the animal industries, animal food industries, and then what's the ratio? Compared to the fruit and vegetables and plant-based foods.
Well, we heard from Cory Booker recently, because we actually we found out about public events that he was making around the country, where he was trying to raise funds, and we had people in Chicago and Newark and DC and San Francisco talk to him and ask him about this. One of the things he told us a couple of times was that animal ag receives about 93% of the subsidies, while only 7% is left for all other forms of agriculture. And I think in that 93%, they're also including like anything like feed crops and other suppliers that the animal ag needs to produce the products. And so, all the crops that are grown and the feed that's grown to feed the animals and all that stuff. And so 93% is what he's told us. And that's pretty much what we've seen from, like, if you go to Environmental Working Group, they have a subsidy tracker, farm subsidy tracker, that's really pretty cool. And they've done a lot of research. It's like from the past, but going into the future, on subsidies and where they're going. So that's a pretty good, about 93%.
Well, that's very disheartening, and so I know a lot of people got mad at Cory Booker, and now I don't know how to feel about that. I feel like, it's a tricky slope. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there's four words that I love to quote Bill Moyer because I think he's got a four-word quote that really puts things into perspective. And his quote is movements lead, politicians follow. Movements lead, politicians follow. I think that really puts things into perspective because we actually think the opposite happens. And we are conditioned to believe that the opposite happens. But in fact, it's people-powered movements that are the catalyst for change. And then once that movement builds enough popular support and enough momentum, then the public starts demanding that change more and politicians follow suit. There's so many examples of this where, um, big political figures were not, and even celebrities, they're not the first to adopt the change. They're actually the last. And we think like, oh, they're such pioneers, but actually the studies that we've seen, they only adopt the change when enough people start demanding it and it's popular and they're not going to lose any support by adopting the change. What's crazy is they actually take credit for it. They
Yeah.
actually take credit for it too. But the movements that, the grassroots side of movements that actually are the catalysts for change rarely ever get they don't get the credit for creating the change. But so the way I look at politicians is that they're never going to be on the forefront of change. But when they make a political calculation that they have, a hard choice to make, they either start adopting that change because there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to do so, and their reputation could suffer if they don't, or they're going to stick with the status quo. And I think in Cory Booker's case, he is at a very pivotal crossroads in his career. We have to remember politicians care about their political career, which is, you can't really blame them, because if they want to survive in that environment, then they have to make certain decisions to preserve their career in politics. And being the fourth ranking Democrat in Congress and having ambitions to run for president again, those forces are very front and center for him, which means that he may make very, very careful decisions and statements about plant-based food system or transitioning. And he might even avoid it, which we've seen him avoid in certain situations. And we know, like, when we've confronted him on this, he doesn't want to talk about the subsidy problem. He doesn't want to talk about the real core problem, which is the money, because money is power. And as long as animal ag has that huge share of the subsidies and the money, they're going to maintain control of our food system. He doesn't want to talk about that yet. And it could have a lot to do with the fact that it's not that he doesn't believe in it. It's hard to say. But it could be that, hey, he's going to run for president. And he needs to be going for, mainstream America. The problem is, though, with that calculation, I think, is that Democrats aren't doing well at all. And if he makes a strong stand against animal ag subsidies and taking money in politics in general, he could really create an appeal to a much broader base of people. And even across the political spectrum, people on the right and the left that just don't believe in the establishment should have that much power, and we should break this corrupt system. And so he could become a more populist figure, and that could win him. That could be the catalyst for him, winning in the next election. Who knows? But in any case, he's afraid, I think, to be too vocal about food system change at this point in time, which I think could be a mistake for him.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. I mean, even just like with our conversations with people, we have to, I have to be careful. Someone was telling me who someone was telling me today about inflammation and arthritis and everything, and many times I've said to her, it's dairy and animal products are causing this, and I guess she read that fruits were causing it. So I mean, I don't know. It's just it's very frustrating, but
Yeah, I bet.
I can understand. I mean, I remember how they were saying that Kamala was trying to take away hamburgers. I mean, it's how it's very frustrating because yes, I mean, if somebody gets up there, if a vegan gets in office and says plant based and really tries to turn the system without having a very secure standing, I mean, well, it's not going to work. So I don't know. It's not all black and white.
Right. Yeah, what's funny though is with Marikita, we're not even asking him to, it's not even like we're asking him to talk about veganism. We're asking about, does he support, well, here's our big question for him, okay?
Uh-huh.
Can you, in good conscience, vote for a new farm bill that continues this disastrous trend of bailing out animal agriculture? Every dollar that is wasted on animal agriculture, a private industry worth $260 billion or more, every dollar wasted on that industry that doesn't need to be subsidized could actually be going into communities to provide desperately needed services. Can you, in good conscience, vote for a farm bill under these circumstances that will continue this trend when you know and you've advocated for a change? And you know what? He doesn't want to answer that question. It's a tough question, but he probably knows in his heart that he shouldn't vote for it. But because he wants to be president, he might just go along with the established view, which would be a shame because he made a 25-hour marathon speech.
I know.
And had us believing he announced he was the disruptor in Congress, and we thought, wonderful. Now manifest that disruption in Congress as a protest vote against this farm bill and say you can't vote for this farm bill under the current conditions. But that's what we told his staff. We had a meeting with his staff, and it was interesting because that's not on their radar. The subsidy question is not on their radar. It's about the EATS Act and Prop 12, just saving Prop 12 from being rolled back.
And so for people that might not know what Prop 12 is, please explain that.
Well, in essence, Prop 12 is the welfare reform law for California that requires producers that want to sell in California pork products or chicken or egg products that they have to meet certain welfare standards. Certain Republicans would like to roll back those Prop 12 and the Supreme Court apparently upheld it, but now Congress can introduce language in the Farm Bill that basically annihilates it if they wanted to. And of course, it's important to have welfare improvements, but that's not the main event. And that's our position with Cory Booker and others that are working on the Farm Bill is the main event is the money. Like Prop 12, I'm sorry to say, is a sideshow. But the main event is who's going to get the money? Who's going to get this $1 trillion.35 and it shouldn't be 93% for animal agriculture. We've got to support healthy plant-based foods, and we got to start shifting that percentage in the plant-based direction.
Yeah, definitely. And what do they say about all the waste and the poison that's going into the land from the factory farms? I mean, what do they even comment on that?
Yeah, you in these hearings, if you listen to these hearings, they're all available for the public hearings where they discuss the farm bill and all that. Um, they do discuss like surprisingly, you'd find discussion about, you know, making healthy food less expensive, even among Republicans. You'd hear this surprisingly. But in general, what I said earlier still holds true. When we've been in these hearings, um, and the ones we've seen the video of, we don't see any environmental, food justice, animal rights, any advocates or activists in the room, um, or people speaking out. Of course, you're not allowed to speak during these hearings, but that hasn't stopped us from speaking out. Like we've done a disruption, but we've also spoken before the gavel goes down. We've tried to speak to senators and Congress people in and out of meetings. So we're doing more of that because we want to face them. What we really think it's important to get in front of them and get face to face, because it's where they can't quite ignore you. You know, they can ignore all your emails and phone calls, but getting in front of them is incredibly important to us.
Yes, and I've seen you get right in front of them, and I've seen them skirt away and run away. And who
Yeah.
would you say is really working hard toward, I mean, to help animals and the environment?
Well, I would say that inside of Congress, there are people that I think are careful about what they say, but they do have those sympathies. But we just have a lot of work to do. We need to build this movement so that there's more people interacting with them. They need to hear the voices of those who care about animals and plant-based food system. And the more they start hearing about this, the more I guarantee you they're going to adopt the views more, because we're already, even just the small group that we are, we're already seeing signs that their thinking and language is changing. And they're starting to say stuff that they would have never said before. There was a lobbyist from the Turkey. He's like the leading spokesperson for the turkey industry. We heard him in a hearing, and he said something just stunning. He said, if we don't figure out this bird flu problem, there will be no future. There will be no future for the poultry or egg industries. And in other words, like, if you want our industry to exist, you've got to help us figure out this problem at taxpayer expense, of course. So we've got a prime opportunity here to say, to be the voice in this room, to say, we don't want you in the future. We don't want disease, contamination, pandemics. We don't want any of that you have to offer. And we want Congress to hear it too, because that's the only way we're going to get them to even think differently, let alone vote and act differently. We got to be there to demand change. So, we're in it for the long haul. It's going to take an effort, but there's lots of little things, little signs that show us that there is change in the air happening on the highest levels.
Well, that's definitely good to know. And what can people, if they want to help your organization, Free from Harm, and they're watching now, where is Free from Harm, and how does that tell us more about it?
Yeah, so we have a mailing list where we put out a weekly calls to action. You can sign up at freefromharm.org to make sure you get the calls to action. It's best to sign up to the email list, but we're also posting almost daily on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube channels. And What we like to do is we do a lot of like videos and actions where we like to show rather than tell, because our idea is like it's more powerful to show people what you could do, um, and give people lots of different ideas of how they could confront their congresspeople, their reps in their district or their senators, and really focus on big picture food system change. Because yeah, you can work on smaller issue campaigns. You can keep that going if you've got a lot going with that, but don't lose sight of the big picture, because we don't have time, and we don't have the time or the luxury of waiting for a better time to do that. This is the time. Bird flu is an emerging threat. There's a perfect storm of problems the animal ag industry is having right now, and there's they're in a very precarious situation with tariffs, with bird flu, with the cost of inputs like feed going up all the time, losing market share, losing export markets because of tariffs and other things, wildfires and extreme climate events that they are primarily like a big cause for. But nonetheless, those wildfires and extreme weather events are imposing huge losses on them. So there's a perfect storm of conditions that mean the time is now for us to really we have a hugely important role to play in terms of exposing this industry and why we need to move on because of all the problems that it's contributing to.
Yeah, this is the time with bird flu and the wet markets and the pandemics. I mean, it's just going to get worse. Definitely, we have
Yeah,
to take action. Um, and so, as the founder, how is your role? How has your role changed throughout the years?
that's a good question. It really has changed a lot. I used to write. I still write, but not as much. I'm more as I approach 60 this year. In August will be my 60th birthday. I feel like, I do love to write. I always have and always will. But, I don't know how many years left I have to make a contribution. Uh, I had a cousin and a friend who were both 60 who passed away suddenly. Um, you know, do I have a couple more years? I could have 10, I could have 20. But in any of those scenarios, I feel like I really have to make the most of the time that I have. And I want to do powerful, bold action. Um, Writing can come later, maybe, when I can't take bold, powerful action. But for now, while I'm physically and mentally able and motivated, I want to uh, carry out actions that inspire more popular support, more activists to get involved, and that's what I feel my role is right now for Free From Harm.
Right. And how about your family members now? Have they become vegan, or are they? Do they have they kind of seen open their eyes? I mean, or what do they think about all this?
Well, I think it's pretty positive overall, like from the feedback that I get. But then, I don't know, some people don't. I don't know if people are just not telling me what they really think, or if the general feeling I get though is it's much more positive, because I think we made an intentional shift in our approach and our messaging too. Instead of focusing on the consumers, we're focused on the big decision makers, the people in our food system that have the power to basically create markets. There's a documentary called The Madmen of Chicago, and it's a short documentary you can watch on YouTube, The Madmen of Chicago, and it's about the ad executives that represented the tobacco and the meat industries in the 50s and 60s, and how they literally created a market of millions of smokers, like out of thin air. They basically said, we want to sell cigarettes. We want to sell certain kinds to men, certain to women. And they created these marketing and ad campaigns that did it. Just, created millions of smokers and increased the consumption of animal products a lot in the 50s and 60s because of these marketing campaigns. So we should never underestimate the power of big agriculture, big powerful people in the food system. If they want to create a market for something, they can do it. They can also be a force for good if groups and movements like us can put enough pressure and attention on them to do the right thing. That's where we come in. That's the role we have to play. And so when we started shifting that from consumers being the problem to the CEOs of Nestle, Fairlife, Coca-Cola, Cargill, and then the senators, the people in Congress that are getting paid off by them, when we started focusing our attention and shining the light on them, I think our supporter base broadened a lot because of that. Because, yeah, we all have personal responsibility for what we decide to purchase and consume. But we all know that there's a lot more power over there and consumers are basically, yeah, they can go out and decide what they're going to buy off the store shelf. But long before that stuff comes to the stores, big decisions are being made behind closed doors. And that's where we decided to shift our attention. And I think, to answer your question, we've gotten more supporters and more public support because, of course, they feel responsible, but they're not directly the people that, we're targeting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, definitely. And now we have another question from Ellen. And I want to also say thank you to JJ for watching. So here's her question. Why do you feel the big groups like U.S. Humane Society and ASPCA, which have millions in donations, aren't working on this, or do you feel they are?
Well, I think they are to a certain extent, but in a very different way. And in social movements, you have the outside game and the inside game. And so the mainstream large institutional nonprofits take the reform approach, the inside game approach. So they recognize the system is broken, the food system's rigged, and it's a big problem. But they are willing to work within the broken system to try to make incremental changes because they feel like it's worth it. Whereas those of us working on the outside say, this system is rigged, it needs to be dismantled. It no longer serves the public. It no longer serves animals. It no longer serves the planet. And we really need fundamental change. And we need it yesterday. We don't have time for incremental change. And we need to be advocating for what we need to survive. Because what's practical is what we need to survive as a species and for other animals to survive. And it's not incremental change. It's something much bolder than that. And that's what we should be advocating for. And so, but even in that space, we still feel that most people are really supportive of the idea of a transition to a plant-based food system, even if they're not plant-based, because they see the logic in it. They understand that we can't perpetuate this path of animal consumption and they can sense what it's doing to the planet and to animals. And the idea of transitioning does make sense to a lot of people. It's not an extreme idea. And even among the Congress people that we talk to, it's not an extreme idea anymore. They may not want to talk about it, but you can definitely tell they don't think it's crazy. They're starting to see the logic in it. So why not? Why shouldn't we be advocating for big picture change? Why should we be willing to settle for small changes that will never be enough in the time that we have to make them? And we don't have a lot of time to play around. So that's my thinking on it.
Well, you're right. We don't have a lot of time to play around. I mean, here's another comment from Ellen. The groups with money should be doing marketing campaigns to put pressure.
The groups with money?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like in some ways they're putting pressure on the system, but the problem is like when you're on the outside of a system, you don't have to worry so much. You don't have special interests to worry about. Like you don't have someone, you can speak the truth and take action with a feeling that you don't have anything to lose. We always want to maintain that impartiality kind of position, because as soon as we have big donors or politicians or celebrities that don't want us to say certain things because it might piss off this group or that group, that's when we're getting co-opted and corrupted by that system. We don't want to, we never need to be in that situation. And that's one of the problems with movements is the larger groups make these connections where they start basing their decisions on whether a big donor is going to be pissed off or a politician that is advancing one of their pieces of legislation, that they will cut them off if they get too active or too strong on a certain position. We never want to find ourselves in that. That's why it's important to be to play the outside game as well, because when you're on the outside, you don't have to worry about these relationships. You're free to speak the truth and expose the corruption. So that's where we want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I see that in places that I volunteer. I mean, having to step carefully or they'll lose the donations. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tough.
Go ahead.
It's a tough line to walk sometimes. We all need support. It's not like, but at the same time, we have to be, true to our vision.
Right. And so what would you say is like, what makes a movement work? I mean, what's the foundation of a movement? I mean,
that's a big question. I'd say, movements, there's a guy named Mark Engler who him and his brother Paul have written a lot on this subject and movement building and measuring. And they say that there's two factors that determine if a movement is moving in the right direction. And the first is, can they see that they are building, their popular support is growing, not declining? And it might be hard to measure that, but you could do it through surveys. You could do it by just seeing that you're building more allies and that you're getting more media attention or whatever. There's lots of different indicators of that. And then the second indicator they talk about is you're building, not losing internal capacity. Like you're building more community, more structures for activists, more people are getting involved and taking action, and your numbers of active supporters is increasing. And if those two things are increasing, they say you're in the right direction. And if they're not, then maybe reevaluate and maybe see how you can change things or realign them.
Right. Well, yeah, now we see a great example in the political movements of today. It's how some have really grown and others, it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Without going down that road, it's just like, wow. Anyway, it's something to look at. To see how did this happen and to learn from. So.
Yeah. And it's not a linear path, it's not like sometimes we take steps backwards. Sometimes we experience setbacks and then we take a few steps forward. But, like you look at other social movements and, what's happening politically today. And in some ways they'd probably say, well, this is a step back. It's not progress, but we'll make up for it in the future. So it's not like sometimes change doesn't stick. Sometimes it gets rolled back. But it's just, one of the things I always like to think about is, what we have today in terms of rights and freedoms were not just given to us. They were hard fought for. Every generation has had to fight to preserve the rights that we have to be activists, to be in a democracy or whatever this is. Maybe it's not a perfect democracy for sure. But every generation has had to fight and to preserve something that's important to them. And we owe it to the future generations to keep this tradition going. We have a responsibility to keep that tradition going for ourselves, but also for future generations.
Yeah, and we have to use our voices. I know when I'm standing outside with my sign or whatever I'm doing, when I'm doing activism, people will tell me, what good did that do? That's not going to do any good. But it does make a difference. And we can't just sit back and hope that everything's going to take care of itself. We have to use our voices. And like you said, that once the people are the ones that are pushing for it, then the politicians will have to listen, because they'll lose their jobs if they don't listen to what the people say. If there's enough people that get out there and speak up, we have to create these movements. We have to be the voice, and we can't. If you're shy and you're scared, there's other ways to take action. What would you recommend for someone who said, there's no way I'm not getting out there? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, well, there's lots of people that might not admit it, but hey, I have to say, for many years, I wasn't real comfortable with that either. I think it grew on me over time. And I think everybody goes through that kind of process, and it's good to challenge yourself and try to ask yourself, what could you do? What would be the next step for you as an activist to expand to grow as an activist and put yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone? Because change doesn't happen in our comfort zone. It's a struggle. It's always a struggle. It's a struggle between different forces in society. And but the reward is that when we start seeing that, like you said, that we're seeing a difference, that we're making an impact. But there's so many behind the scenes roles that people can play, because they can write, they can do digital actions, they can write people they can do campaign, they can do behind the scenes stuff. A lot of people see actions that we do and they see someone speaking out to, you know, some powerful person and they think, oh my gosh, I'd never be able to do that. But that's just one role, and it's an important role. But there's also somebody taking video. There's also somebody who planned this whole event and, figured out when and where this was happening. And, there's many, many different behind the scenes roles that are needed to pull off something very public like that. So I always say there's a place for everybody who's interested.
Well, that's very true. You're right. All people, that all the skills are needed. So, Robert,
Yeah.
what are your final words here? And let us know again where we can find Free from Harm and get connected with you.
Get signed up on our mailing list if you're not on our email list yet. We don't send out daily emails, just once or two a week, but they're always like actions you can take. So get on our list at freefromharm.org and follow us. Our website is quite frankly kind of a mess. So there's a lot of information on the site, but a lot of it isn't very current. Where we're current and really showing what we're doing now is on our social channels. So Instagram and Facebook primarily, and TikTok as well.
All right, great. So you'll have to definitely connect and do what you can. Look where your skills are. I mean, if they're behind the scenes or they're getting up front, then if you want to play a bigger part, definitely get a hold of Robert because I'm sure that you can help.
Yeah, once people get signed up, they can also sign up for an orientation, which is where we take a closer look. We have a one-on-one call, and we really try to figure out where that person can kind of thrive in our activism work and define that better for that person. So we call that an orientation session.
Great.
So,
all right. Well, that sounds perfect for everyone watching. Definitely check out Free from Harm, and you've been doing such amazing work. I mean, we're very honored to have you here, Robert, and I'm honored that everyone, Ellen and JJ and Samara came. And let me make sure to remind everyone to visit us at www.all-creatures.org and help support this program by making a one-time or recurring donation of any amount. We're very grateful for you all. And also subscribe. So, Robert, thank you so much for your hard work. And we're going to be watching. I know there's a lot of short little clips of action that you all have taken.
mm-hmm.
So we're going to keep our eyes open for that and keep learning from you and keep on going. Like you said, you're going to keep going until you can. So thank you for your hard work.
Oh, thank you too. I love your show and thanks for all that you do.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.